I'm back out at ETTS. Got some more preseason training to do, so looking forward to the 2024 season. But I've been talking with Scott Peterson of Veracity Solutions and also Trigonometry here on YouTube. Check him out, go follow his channel and him on Instagram. He's been helping me as I prep and kind of like more on the mental side of training and like setting goals. And so had a conversation with him not long ago about kind of what my goals were coming into 2024 and getting him to hold me accountable. Since we'll be shooting some of the same matches, hopefully we'll be squatted together so I can kind of pick his brain some more at those matches. One of the things he said was, he's like, hey, one of your goals should be point of impact shift. Try to have no point of impact shift from every position. So I'm out here testing that. So I've got the Sons of Liberty broadsword out here. I've got targets out at 100. I'll show you those in a second. So I'm gonna do 0, 0 confirm, and then we're gonna test different positions to see if there's an impact shift, if I'm causing an impact shift. So what happens is, because we approach each position or each level of barricade different, sometimes we put more input into the gun than we do in other positions. And so you see this a lot when guys move from prone to standing or prone to kneeling, because in prone, we don't really put anything into the gun, or some guys will load into a gun or pull on it, and then when you get to a different position, they can't do that the same way, so their point of impact changes, even though they're aiming at the same spot every time. So we're just gonna check that. If I'm able to shoot this and there's no point of impact shift, we're gonna see if we can force it to have point of impact shift. So one of the things that they talked about the new development of this broadsword is that it's supposed to be the lockup and the rail and the way it locks into the upper is supposed to eliminate a lot of that point of impact shift. We're gonna test that at the end and see if we can force it to shift. All right, so after doing that initial round of testing, I was very happy with the results. So I'll show you guys really quick the groups. So each of these is a 5-shot group at 100 yards. Each of these squares, for those of you who want to know on the internet, is 1 inch. So as you can see here, this is our kneeling, what was the low kneeling position. And our point of impact, no big difference there. It was slightly to the right, I would say, by 0.1, 0.2 mils. That's me, not the gun. So very promising that moving from prone up to kneeling, there's no noticeable difference, telling me that 1, my positions are pretty good, but 2, the lockup between the upper and the rail are also pretty solid. Again, saw the same thing with high kneeling, so no big noticeable shift there, just a called flyer by me. And then when we moved on to low standing, this is where we started to get a bit of a shift. Now, if you notice, we do have an upward shift here. And then when we jump over to standing, it comes back down. So for me, rewatching the footage and knowing what I was doing there, this shift up is caused by the shooter, not by the gun. And the reason that is that when you go into a low standing position, the tendency for me is to put a downward pressure into the back of the gun, which causes it to come up a little bit. My eye relief also isn't as good as it is when I'm standing because of that awkward position. So I do get a little bit of scope shadow and I'm not quite where I need to be. So this shift is caused by the shooter and not necessarily the gun because of what we saw, 1, at the 2 kneeling positions, and 2, what we saw at the standing position, because it went right back when I was in a better position and not putting that downward pressure into the back of the gun. Because that went away, that was the shooter, not the gun. But it's good to see that the groupings are still around an MOA with the ammo I was using to test this. So overall, the findings were encouraging for me as a shooter, because I know my positions are pretty good going into the season. I do need to clean this up a bit. Still going to work on these positions to make sure we're getting that point of impact down as small, point of impact shift down as small as possible from all of these positions. But also it gives me more confidence in this gun as I'm, you know, still getting more rounds underneath my belt going into competition. I'm somebody who really likes to be confident in my gear. And so like I like to test it a lot before I get to a match. So testing all this has given me a lot of confidence getting ready for that first match. So I'm super excited about that. But I wanted to test it further and I wanted to see, can I make it flex? Now every rail on the market's gonna flex, no matter who the manufacturer is, no matter what they say, no matter what their lockup is, you're going to get some degree of flex. If there was no flex in it, it would eventually be brittle and it would just break. So there has to be some flex in that rail from one degree or another. The longer the rail is, you're gonna get more flex than on a shorter rail. So I wanted to see for myself how much flex, how much point of impact shift could I cause in this new rail and lockup out of this broadsword, because I'm still getting acquainted with it, because it's still new to me. So the way I wanted to conduct this test to see how much point of impact shift I could cause is that, again, every rail flexes. It has some degree of deflection. So we're going to test it in two ways. Essentially, we're checking to see if the rail pushes up and if the rail pushes down and how much. So I've got a kind of a crude drawing here of our upper rail. It's our muzzle device. This is our optic, and then it's kind of our point of aim. So what I'm going to do in the first test is we're going to put the tripod back here about middle of the gun. So we're going to support the middle of the rail. And then we're going to put weight on the front of it downward to try to push the rail down to see if we can cause a downward deflection. So what we should see is a point of impact shift down. Now it's a matter of how much is that going to be. And then the other test we're going to do is we're going to move the tripod to the front, and then we're going to hang the weight off of the middle of the rail. And what this is essentially going to do is going to create an upward pressure on the front of this rail, which again should cause a point of impact shift, but upward this time. So we'll see how much impact shift it causes. And I'll show you guys how I did that test here. So the results of that are, when we put the weight at the front of the rail, we did in fact get a point of impact shift about an inch below our initial point of aim area. So a little over an inch. And then when we swapped it around, put the tripod at the front of the rail and then put the weight in the middle of it, causing that upward pressure on the front of the rail, what we got was what we expected, and a slightly over an inch of point of impact shift from our initial point of aim. Why does this matter for you? Well, one, you should, as Scott said, you should be testing your positions to see what your point of impact shift is in all of those positions, because that's testing your skill, it's testing the shooter to see what you're doing different in each of these positions. So that's why I want to do this video, one, to show you that, but two, test your gear to see what the limits of it are. Where does that start to fall off? Like I said, every rail is going to flex. I don't care who it is or what they say about their lockup, about their rail. You're going to get some degree of flex. And there's, in some cases, it can be better or worse, depending on what it does. And that's a whole nother topic to deep dive into another day. But you want to be able to know for a fact and have confidence in your gear about how much it's going to give, at what point does it start to fall off. And the only way you're going to find that out is by doing things like this and testing it for yourself. So that's why I wanted to show this. One, so you could see it for yourself, so you can test your own gear, determine, hey, my rail flexes 2 MOA when I put a weight at the end of it. Is that acceptable for what I want to do? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That's up for you to determine, not me. And the second thing is I want to show the Broadsword for what it is. I'm not trying to sell anything to anyone. This is just my experience with it as I'm learning this platform and getting comfortable with it, ready for matches. And so I'm very confident now walking away from this, getting ready for the upcoming matches in the upcoming season. And there will be some people say, well, why didn't you compare it to this rail or this lockup or that one? One, there's too many on the market for me to test all of them. And even if we did, people would be like, oh, you're just shilling for this brand or that brand. So like, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give you guys the test. You determine for yourself, test it, test your rails, test what you're using for yourself to determine. But I do know for a fact, there are a lot of popular rails on the market that flex a lot more than this does at 100 yards. So test it for yourself, find out for yourself what your gear does and if it's acceptable for you. And so the last thing I want to say on this about, the last test and, adding the weight on it and that, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's not realistic. Who's going to do that? Nobody does that. True. Nobody does do that. But what people do is they take their sling when they're shooting from a tripod, and they'll wrap their sling around one of the legs of the tripod, and you tension down on that and you pull that to stabilize the gun so that it's not wobbling as much. It reduces your wobble zone. Well, when you do that, the sling that you have at the front of this gun is pulling that rail down and away at an angle. So it's going to create a point of impact shift away from your target. So it's good to know this, because if you're somebody who shoots like that, it will create that point of impact shift. Or if you use the hog leash from Ridgeline and you strap it into your belt and you cinch it down, it's going to create a similar point of impact shift. Or if you're somebody who's on a barricade and you swim into your sling and you like to wrench down on that sling to create tension so that it reduces your wobble zone, it could create a point of impact shift. So while the test itself may not seem realistic, the results from it are something that you will see in competition, in training, and real world. It's good for you to test your gear and figure out where these fall-off points are and know for yourself what these point of impact shifts look like. Hopefully that you guys found this helpful. Hopefully you guys get out and test this for yourselves. If you have any questions about any of this or the Broadsword, or is there anything else you guys want to see, leave it in the comments down below. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Karate chop that bell so you get notified every time I upload a video, and I will see you guys in the next one.